Hello, this is Samantha and Zessie.
It's your boy, Remoy George Philip Lee first.
And this is Masculinity.
I can't lie, I'm going to be dragging today. I mean, it's just it's basketball all the time. I don't have time for sleep.
You mean you're playing basketball?
No,
or
I'm
you're
loving
watching basketball?
the NBA.
Yes.
And, it started, it's fresh, it's out here. The Warriors suck, the Clippers are awesome.
I know.
The Sixers are all arms and all defense. It's crazy out here right now.
I know. I think I think this might be the first time that I actually buy an NBA jersey. I'm going to get the Clippers Kawhi jersey. It's happening.
You've never had an NBA jersey?
I mean, not as an adult. I used to go to Champs and get the $10 ones. Yeah, but I'm about to deck out. I'm about to get the nice stitch ones.
I can't judge that much because jerseys are mad expensive these days.
Yeah, dude, they're hella
almost
expensive.
Now,
Yeah.
F that, never mind. I changed my whole stance on that one.
But in other news, I saw a movie this week, or last week, I guess, that changed my world. Have you seen The Last Black Man in San Francisco?
I have not. Why don't you tell me about it?
So it's amazing. And it's basically the story of this young man who is a little bit of a spoiler, but basically he is trying to reclaim the house that his grandfather built, which is if you guys know anything about San Francisco, obviously it's stupid expensive, and it just follows his tenacity. And then the best part about the movie is really just the love that he and his best friend have for one another. It's very much just a love story between two best friends in a way. It's completely just loving and tender, and one of them is super upbeat, and the other one is just really thoughtful and just supportive. It's beautiful.
I mean, from what it sounds like a movie that's saying something without saying something. Those are the best kind of movies.
I know. There's a lot of skateboarding in the movie too, which is hella cute. I love when I see Black people skateboard. It gives me so much joy.
I don't know if I've ever seen that in a movie. This is wild. I gotta go see it now.
No.
All right, so let's jump into it. Yeah, we're still talking about addiction, right? We're in this addiction module, and we spent some time talking about personal experiences, getting into the nitty gritty and talking about how addiction has affected our lives, especially my lives. I owned up to me performing this said mask of masculinity. I know you can't believe it, but I can believe it. I perform masculinity hard K.
Yeah, I mean, we can kind of believe it. You're not the one man who's not out here performing masculinity.
Okay, seriously, I think I am, but...
So, you're performing like the rest of us,
Okay, fine. Yeah, so we talked about my experiences, but we also talked to Dennis Shinsky a few weeks ago about when he worked in the oil industry. Turns out, since it's a hyper-masculine industry, the potential for substance abuse and addiction is super common. Dennis spoke about how the men he grew up with and worked with were constantly trying to prove how strong they were, and conversely, weren't able to be vulnerable and talk about their emotions, and talk about their emotions and how drugs and alcohol were a constant. You know what that sounds like?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't you tell us?
No, why don't you tell us, Remoy? Because you obviously want to.
It sounds like masculinity hard K.
Cool. You got that one out? You good? You proud of yourself?
I mean, a little.
Okay, so what we've learned so far is that excessive consumption becomes a ritualistic part of the performance of masculinity. Honestly, ushering people into a higher level of their manhood, whether it's alcohol, sex, or whatever else, honestly, their ritual of peers pressuring their peers into consuming to see how much they can hurt themselves and stay standing is the most usual form of men's transition into a new period of their life. It's the most quintessential compensation of a void as a masculine person. And in many ways, we're more okay with people hurting themselves for sport and dismissing it as men being brutes who just can't get a hold of their emotions or have self-control. And mostly we're really okay with that.
I mean, we are, but we aren't.
I mean, what do you mean?
I mean, we obviously don't want men to be out here hurting.
Okay, but we also prefer to have men keep things to themselves rather than let them cry or even talk about their feelings. In the end, that inability for emotional vulnerability ends up leading to more opportunities for substance abuse and addiction.
Yeah, you're right. You aren't wrong with that.
Well, I mean, I guess we just have to start looking at these frameworks that we've built. How can a man protect you if he's crying, for example? Or how can a man provide for you and be the head of the household if he can't mute his emotions long enough to steer the ship? What does it mean? What does it really mean to be a leader? I mean, we as a whole society Meaning even you and me, right? Right here on this podcast have a hard time believing a person can actually be both.
Yeah, I got you. It's not that it's not challenging or hard to think about, but I follow.
Yeah, it's hard because in a way we're all complicit in maintaining this line of thinking because it's become our normal way of living. And also, if we do start thinking about it, it's just overwhelming or uncomfortable because changing the way we live and expect it, and honestly, the way we expect others to live is like honestly going into the unknown. And so this is kind of our hypothesis, but we've got some folks,
Shout out to folks.
yep, who are here to give us their insights, their ideas, and just their experience on how masculinity, substance abuse, and addiction have affected their lives. And so we're glad to have them. So thanks for being here. Can you introduce yourself? Just like tell us a little bit about your experience with substance abuse and addiction.
Okay, my name is Bill Newman. I'm from the high desert in California. I'm from a little town called Barstow. I'm a person who grew up in the 60s. So once I got, 17, 18 years old, I experimented with almost everything. Speed, coke, smoked a lot of herb, but I had an experience with my father. His friend came over and he was really, really drunk, but he was so drunk he really wasn't able to communicate. And that was basically my first experience with alcohol abuse. That's pretty much it.
Hi, I'm Sterling Cruz, her, and my pronouns are they and them. So I grew up in rural Southwest Texas, and I started drinking and using in high school, and I lost a job at age 19. I went out, I had an hour between the lunch shift and the dinner shift, and it was 2-for-1 margaritas, and went out and had more than enough and came back and got fired. And I spent about 20 years trying to deal with it, a lot of it unsuccessfully. I got 5 years clean. And then around age 40, I put it down for the last time, and this week is 18 years clean and sober. I think dealing with the shame of being a queer person in rural Southwest Texas, not even knowing, like genderqueer or trans, it was a way to suppress feelings. So it was decades of that.
Yeah, my name is Chris Totoro. I'm from Nyack, New York. When I was a kid, alcohol was fairly ubiquitous. It was just like the most natural thing to see people drinking, to the point where like at 7 years old, I had a friend spending the night at the house. It was like we didn't know what to do. So like, why don't we go have a drink, right? And we didn't really like the liquor. It was bourbon. We didn't know what we were doing, right? It was disgusting. It was awful. But I don't talk a lot about the specifics of the chemicals themselves. I think that that's detrimental. I think that it kind of feeds this idea of our obsession with the chemicals rather than the process. Like, what's at the heart of it, right? Like that feeling of profound emptiness, that sorrow that I could never express, that feeling that I never fit anywhere, that the world was just there to brutalize me, that at any point something could become humiliating. And I think that the core of everything is like really in that place of I don't know how to be in the world or to be a person around other people without something to moderate this experience, something that gives me a feeling of control over how I feel or of what's going on.
Like one thing that you said that's definitely stands out is just like kind of like tasting alcohol because it's there and you're like, oh, you're supposed to do this, but you actually don't even really like it.
Yeah, when I think about this, particularly in like what I was taught, I grew up in a town that was like a lot of cops and a lot of firemen from Manhattan, very Irish, very, very closed in a number of ways. And so there was like this whole thing about like, you handle your shit. When I think about it in terms of like how I was socialized, I also went to Catholic school. So talk about like, repressed town, repressed school, repressed everything. Like, I'm amazed I could go to the bathroom, quite honestly. Like, there's that deep sense of shame and shaming, right?
Well, I think, meeting women who are attracted to masculinity and being a bad dog. So I think that certainly um, reinforces the idea that this is me and this makes sense for who I am.
I mean, as a young man, we were all like a group, and we'd play cards, or watch games, and part of drinking was just part of our everyday thing. But it was something that we just considered as part of everyday living, and reflecting back now, it was just part of our socialization.
Can you like go back to maybe like the first time you had a drink or a smoke or you consumed a drug and like asking yourself now why the hell you did that? Like literally, why was the reason you did that?
There was nothing else to do. Really, and that was how you were social.
For me, I was in the maybe 7th grade, and I went to lunch with my mom and her friend, served wine, and I got to have a little bit, and I just was a fiend right away. Like, I wanted to figure out how maybe they'd turn their back, or I could fake something and get a little bit, because it just was immediately so awesome.
Well, I can remember the first time I drank and the first time I got drunk, and it was my senior graduation night. And maybe that had something to do with masculinity, because all of us had decided way ahead of time we were all going to be able to get some peppermint schnapps and some whatever else we could get, and we had a spot we went to, and we were going to drink and get drunk. That was the plan. The night of my graduation, I remember very little of. And after that experience, I had such a hangover, I didn't drink for the next couple of years. But when I was in college, the parties, everyone drank, I thought, and I drank along with everyone else. Maybe that was part of the masculine thing, to be able to drink a lot, and whoever drank a lot and didn't get so drunk that they were out of control, we kind of had some admiration towards them. So maybe that was that part of that whole game we were playing.
There's a way in which you're describing this that seems like social and innocuous in a way. And I'm wondering, so like outside of partying, if you had experiences where you were commuting with like your guy friends that involved or didn't involve alcohol, where you opened up to one another.
Rarely. Every once in a while somebody would start to, but then somebody would shut them up. Like, that ain't cool. You don't do that. Like, it's not about that.
I was born in 1950, and a man just didn't do that. So, talking to each other about our personal experience like that, it showed that we're soft. So, I was a grown man before I felt comfortable talking to my friends about my personal business. And that's part of probably our socialization.
In these conversations, there's clearly a lot of social interactions, right? You're like around people, you're around people that you spend a lot of time with. You're essentially almost like performing connection, if I may say so. But in there's like that question of like, did you feel like people really had your back? Did you feel like you had people to turn to?
I would say that addiction is so profoundly lonely that you're alone when you're with people. If you don't have that language of connection, like, how do you learn how to feel what other people feel if you're so disconnected from your own feelings and repressing it with drugs and alcohol?
I want to have a little bit of a discussion. There's like a socialization essentially into almost a socialization into loneliness. And I wonder, like, what happens then where you're actually then going to choose to like recover from that and like take a turning point from that?
My son has dealt with substance abuse. He never ever came to me to talk to me about how he was in trouble. I really didn't talk to him until he had already been incarcerated and was already in a substance abuse program. So I don't know if that was part of the way I dealt with problems I had. I just wouldn't talk about them. I think my son and I, we had the same situation.
For me, like when you think about masculinity and thinking about transgressing against it, I think it's about softening. You know, it's no doubt difficult for a lot of people, but I think that's kind of part of what's called on people to if they want to recover.
I really dig that. I identify with that softening thing. I went through a bunch of different rehabs, and there were always rules and rules and rules and rules and rules. And then I got involved in a 12-step program and more rules, right? And then there's the steps, which were related to like rules. And I think about that first step. Like I admitted I'm powerless over my addiction. My life had become unmanageable. But that's not true because I stopped. So if I was truly powerless, I would never stop. But if I never softened to the reality of what that actually was, then it becomes about that rule. And then if I'm trying to help other people, I've got to make them obey the rule rather than get into that softer place of like, what was this and what is the accessibility of it and how does this thing actually work? Like, what does this actually mean in my life and how am I connecting to it rather than enforcing it?
So actually, if you can, describe like what masculinity meant to you before substance use, if you remember.
Yeah, part of my maturity was I found out that a real man doesn't have to do it all by himself. Not telling anybody about anything personal was a trait that a real man was supposed to have. And I think it had a lot to do with the change in society, being able to get me and other men my age group to feel that it's okay to be a little vulnerable like that, and that it doesn't make you less of a man if you do tell someone else about some of the things you're going through.
I think I didn't embrace the idea of masculinity. I was butch, I was tough, and I think it was about women who were attracted to me found that mess attractive. And now my wife finds it much more attractive when I'm doing what I need to do to take care of my business. And there's just so much pain and suffering in the world. Seems like I'm in touch with it now more than ever. And I'm not invested in being masculine. I'm invested in being wholehearted.
Looking back, I think that one of the most profound things that I really remember is that it was violently heteronormative. That was what that was about. I went to an all-boys Catholic high school. I grew up in that town filled with cops and firemen. I grew up with all of that stuff. But it was always like fear and conformity and always being protected against that. And so anything that was like performative or overt had to reinforce that narrative of like I'm tough or I'm strong or I'm sexually dominant or getting a reputation for sexual dominance or sexual conquests and that kind of stuff. And so like that was a big, big piece of what that was when I was growing up.
And before we close out, I just want to, some of you already kind of said a little bit about that, but, after everything that's happened and where you are now in your life, what masculinity means to you, what personhood means to you, what, manhood means to you, all of that stuff. And understanding that these terms obviously don't mean the same thing. They're not interchangeable, but just a final thought on that before we close.
I'd just say as someone who identifies as transgender, I feel blessed to be able to draw from both sides of the gender binary.
Yeah, I it's interesting because I don't really think about masculinity too much now, or feminine. I think about it in those terms, like of what you're talking about, Sterling. Of I'm way more interested in humanity than I am in any of these other labels that we have to create some kind of construct through which we brutalize each other, right? So like for me, it's like okay, so courage is supposed to be some kind of masculine thing, and nurturing is supposed to be this feminine quality, but like maybe we could try it out where that's like just human qualities, and then like if there are inherent masculine or feminine or whatever qualities, then they'll become so much less relevant because it's not about that and reinforcing that role. It's about, like, how are we being people and how are we being human beings with each other?
I don't know. One of the reasons I like this show is I think the idea that masculinity is a mask that people wear. I think that it's possible that both cisgender men and women have these bullshit reasons for not being soft and for not being wholehearted, not being open. If we can draw on the best of all the things that we see from men, women, transgender people, queer people, then we're able to live more wholehearted lives.
Yeah, well, I'm learning every day, and I've learned things from my kids. That I can open up a little more. I can express happiness, sadness with them a little bit more. Just feeling more comfortable and not tripping so hard about what my image is supposed to be from the outside, rather than I can kind of define it myself to feel comfortable doing it.
Again, thank you so much for your participation. And to all of you out there listening, thank you so much for listening to this conversation, for making this topic part of your lives and part of the things that you think about and want to make a difference in. We will be posting resources. We're continuing to post resources on addiction and masculinity on our social media, which you can find at Masculinity Pod, spelled with a K, on all major platforms. And by all major platforms, we mean Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Please leave us some reviews. Let us know how you feel. We're a masculinity podcast at whoistheo.com. We want to hear from you. So without further ado, thank you all for listening. This has been fun. My name is Samantha and Zessie.
Your boy Remoy, George Phillip, the first.
And this has been Masculinity. Thank you for listening.
Thanks so much.
Ciao.
Thank you.
Thank you.